International Short Stories, Volume 2, English Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Gabby Cowan. International Short Stories, Volume 2, English Stories, edited by William Patten. Section 27, Mr. O'Leary's Second Love, by Charles Lever. You may easily suppose, began Mr. O'Leary, that the unhappy termination of my first passion served as a shield to me for a long time against my unfortunate tendencies toward the fair, and such was really the case. I never spoke to a young lady for 3 years after without a reeling in my head, so associated in my mind was love and seasickness. However, at last, what will not time do? It was about 4 years from the date of this adventure when I became so oblivious of my former failure as again to tempt my fortune. My present choice, in every way unlike the last, was a gay, lively girl of great animal spirits, and a considerable turn for raillery, that spared no one. The members of her own family were not even sacred in her eyes, and her father, a reverend dean, as frequently figured among the ludicrous as his neighbors. The Evershams had been very old friends of a rich aunt of mine, who never, by the by, had condescended to notice me till I made their acquaintance. But no sooner had I done so than she sent for me and gave me to understand that in the event of my succeeding to the hand of Fanny Eversham, I should be her heir and the possessor of about £60,000. She did not stop here, but by canvassing the dean in my favour, speedily put the matter on a most favourable footing, and in less than 2 months I was received as the accepted suitor for the fair Fanny, then one of the reigning belles of Dublin. They lived at this time about 3 miles from town in a very pretty country, where I used to pass all my mornings and many of my evenings too, in a state of happiness that I should have considered perfect if it were not for 2 unhappy bloods: one, the taste of my betrothed for laughing at her friends; another, the diabolical propensity of my intended father-in-law to talk politics. To the former I could submit, but with the latter's submission only made bad worse, for he invariably drew up as I receded, dryly observing that with men who had no avowed opinions it was ill agreeing, or that with persons who kept their politics as a schoolboy does his pocket money, never to spend, and always ready to change, it was unpleasant to dispute. Such taunts as these I submitted to, as well as I might, secretly resolving that as I now knew the meaning of Whig and Tory, I contrived to spend my life after marriage out of the worthy dean's diocese. Time wore on, and at length, to my most pressing solicitations, it was conceded that a day for our marriage should be appointed. Not even the unlucky termination of this my second love affair can deprive me of the happy souvenir of the few weeks which were to intervene before our destined union. The mornings were passed in ransacking all the shops where wedding finery could be procured. Laces, blondes, velvets, and satins littered every corner of the deanery, and there was scarcely a carriage in the coachmaker's yard in the city that I had not sat and jumped in to try the springs, by the special direction of Mrs. Eversham, who never ceased to impress me with the awful responsibility I was about to take upon me in marrying so great a prize as her daughter. a feeling I found very general among many of my friends at the Kildare Street Club. Among the many indispensable purchases which I was to make, and about which Fanny expressed herself more than commonly anxious, was a saddle horse for me. She was a great horsewoman and hated riding with only a servant, and had given me to understand as much about half a dozen times each day for the last 5 weeks. How shall I acknowledge it? Equestrianism was never my forte. I had all my life considerable respect for the horse as an animal, pretty much as I dreaded a lion or a tiger. But as to any intention of mounting upon the back of one and taking a ride, I should as soon have dreamed of taking an airing upon a giraffe, and as to the thought of buying, feeding, and maintaining such a beast at my own proper cost, I should just as soon have determined to purchase a pillory or a docking stool by way of amusing my leisure hours. However, Fanny was obstinate. Whether she suspected anything or not, I cannot say, but nothing seemed to turn her from her purpose, and although I pleaded 1,000 things in delay, yet she grew each day more impatient, and at last I saw there was nothing for it but to submit. When I arrived at this last bold resolve, I could not help feeling that to possess the horse and not be able to mount him was only deferring the ridicule, and as I had so often expressed the difficulty I felt in suiting myself as a cause of my delay, I could not possibly come forward with anything very objectionable, or I should be only the more laughed at. There was then but one course to take. A fortnight still intervened before the day which was to make me happy, and I accordingly resolved to take lessons in riding during the interval, and by every endeavour in my power become, if possible, able to pass muster on the saddle before my bride. Poor old Lalouette understood but little of the urgency of the case when I requested his leave to take my lessons each morning at 6 o'clock, for I dare not absent myself during the day without exciting suspicion, and never, I will venture to assert, did knight errant of old strive harder for the hand of his lady love than I did during that weary fortnight. If a hippogriff had been the animal I bestrode, instead of being, as it was, an old wall-eyed grey, I could not have felt more misgivings at my temerity, or more proud of my achievement. In the first 3 days, the unaccustomed exercise proved so severe, that when I reached the deanery I could hardly move, and crossed the floor pretty much as a pair of compasses might be supposed to do if performing that exploit. Nothing, however, could equal the kindness of my poor dear mother-in-law in embryo, and even the dean too. Fanny, indeed, said nothing, but I rather think she was disposed to giggle a little, but my rheumatism, as it was called, was daily inquired after, and I was compelled to take some infernal stuff in my port wine at dinner that nearly made me sick at table. "I am sure you walk too much," said Fanny, with one of her knowing looks. "Papa, don't you think he ought to ride? It would be much better for him." "I do, my dear," said the dean, "but then, you see, he is so hard to be pleased in a horse. Your old hunting days have spoiled you, but you must forget Melton and Grantham and condescend to keep a hack." I must have looked confoundedly foolish here, for Fanny never took her eyes off me, and continued to laugh in her own wicked way. It was now about the 9th or 10th day of my purgatorial performances, and certainly if there be merit in fleshly mortifications, these religious exercises of mine should stand my part hereafter. A review had been announced in the Phoenix Park, which Fanny had expressed herself most desirous to witness, and as the dean would not permit her to go without a chaperon, I had no means of escape, and promised to escort her. No sooner had I made this rash pledge than I hastened to my confidential friend, Lalouette, and having imparted to him my entire secret, asked him in a solemn and imposing manner, "Can I do it?" The old man shook his head dubiously, looked grave, and muttered at length, "Much depends on the horse." "I know it, I know it, I feel it," said I eagerly. "Then where are we to find an animal that will carry me peaceable through this awful day? I care not for the price. Votre affaire ne sera pas trop chère," said he. "Why, how do you mean?" said I. He then proceeded to inform me that, by a singularly fortunate chance, there took place that day an auction of cast horses, as they are termed, which had been used in the horse police force, and that from long riding and training to stand fire, nothing could be more suitable than one of these, being both easy to ride and not given to start a noise. I could have almost hugged the old fellow for this happy suggestion, and waited with impatience for 3 o'clock to come, when we repaired together to Essex Bridge, at that time the place selected for these sales. I was at first a little shocked at the look of the animals drawn up. They were most miserably thin, most of them swelled in the legs, few without sore backs, and not one eye on an average in every 3, but still they were all high steppers and carried a great tail. "There's your affaire," said the old Frenchman, as a long-legged, fiddle-headed beast was led out, turning out his 4 legs so as to endanger the man who walked beside him. "Yes, there's blood for you," said Charlie Dicer, seeing my eye fixed on the wretched beast, "equal to fixed in stone with any foxhound's, safe in all his paces, unwarranted sound, except," added he in a whisper, "a slight spavin in both hind legs, ring-boned, and a little touch in the wind." Here the animal gave an approving cough. "Will any gentleman say £50 to begin?" But no gentleman did. A hackney coachman, however, said 5, and the sale was opened, the beast trotting up and down nearly over the bidders at every moment, and plunging on so that it was impossible to know what was doing. 5, 10, 15, £6. "Thank you, sir. Guineas, £7, said I, bidding against myself, not perceiving that I had spoken last. "Thank you, Mr. Moriarty," said Dicer, turning toward an invisible purchaser supposed to be in the crowd. "Thank you, sir, you'll not let a good one go that way." Every one here turned to find out the very knowing gentleman, but he could nowhere be seen. Dicer resumed, "7.10 for Mr. Moriarty, going for 7.10. A cruel sacrifice. There's action for you, playful beast." Here the devil had stumbled and nearly killed a basket woman with 2 children. "8," said I with a loud voice. £8, quite absurd," said Dicer almost rudely. "A charger like that for £8, going for £8, going, nothing about £8, no reserve, gentlemen, you are aware of that. They are all, as it were, His Majesty's stud, no reserve whatever. Last time, £8, gone." Amid a very hearty cheer from the mob, God knows why, but a Dublin mob always cheer, I returned, accompanied by a ragged fellow leading my new purchase after me with a hay halter. "What is the meaning of those letters?" said I, pointing to a very conspicuous G.R. with sundry other enigmatical signs burned upon the animal's hind quarter. "That's to show he was a police," said the fellow with a grin, "and when ye ride with ladies ye must turn the decoy side." The auspicious morning at last arrived, and, strange to say, that the first waking thought was of the unlucky day that ushered in my yachting excursion 4 years before. Why this was so, I cannot pretend to guess. There was but little analogy in the circumstances, at least so far as anything had then gone. "How is Marius?" said I to my servant as he opened my shutters. Here let me mention that a friend of the Kildare Street Club had suggested this name, from the remarkably classic character of my steed's countenance. His nose, he assured me, was perfectly Roman. "Marius is doing finely, sir, barring his cough, and the trifle that ails his hind legs." "He'll carry me quietly, Simon, eh?" "Quietly! I'll warrant he carried you quietly, if that's all." Here was comfort, certainly. Simon had lived 40 years as pantry boy with my mother, and knew a great deal about horses. I dressed myself, therefore, in high spirits, and if my pilot jacket and oilskin cap in former days have half persuaded me that I was born to marine achievements, certainly my cords and tops that morning went far to convince me that I must have once been a very keen sportsman somewhere without knowing it. It was a delightful July day that I set out to join my friends, who, having recruited a large party, were to rendezvous at the corner of Stephen Green's. Thither I proceeded in a certain rambling trot, which I have often observed is a very favourite pace with timid horsemen and gentlemen of the medical profession. I was hailed with a most hearty welcome by a large party as I turned out of Grafton Street, among whom I perceived several friends of Miss Eversham, and some young dragoon officers, not of my acquaintance, but who appeared to know Fanny intimately, and were laughing heartily with her as I rode up. I don't know if other men have experienced what I am about to mention or not, but certainly to me there is no more painful sensation than to find yourself among a number of well-mounted, well-equipped people, while the animal you yourself bestride seems only fit for the kennel. Every look that is cast at your unlucky steed, every whispered observation about you, are so many thorns in your flesh, till at last you begin to feel that your appearance is for very little else than the amusement and mirth of the assembly, and every time you rise in your stirrups you excite a laugh. "Where for mercy's sake did you find that creature?" said Fanny, surveying Marius through her glass. "Oh, him? Why, he's a handsome horse, if in condition. A charger, you know, that's his style." "Indeed," lisped a young lancer, "I should be devilish sorry to charge or be charged with him." And here they all chuckled at this puppy's silly joke, and I drew up to repress further liberties. "Is he anything of a fencer?" said a young country gentleman. "To judge from his near eye, I should say much more of a boxer," said another. Here commenced a running fire of pleasantry at the expense of my poor steed, which, not content with attacking his physical, extended to his moral qualities. An old gentleman near me observing that I ought not to have mounted him at all, seeing he was so the deuce groggy, to which I replied by insinuating that if others present were as free from the influence of ardent spirits, society would not be a sufferer, an observation that, I flatter myself, turned the mirth against the old fellow, for they all laughed for a quarter of an hour after. Well, at last we set out in a brisk trot, and placed near Fanny, I speedily forgot all my annoyances in the prospect of figuring to advantage before her. When we reached the college green, the leaders of the cortege suddenly drew up, and we soon found that the entire street opposite the bank was filled with a dense mob of people, who appeared to be swayed hither and thither, like some mighty beast, as the individuals composing it were engaged in close conflict. It was nothing more nor less than one of those almost weekly rows which then took place between the students of the university and the townspeople, and which rarely ended without serious consequences. The numbers of people pressing on to the scene of action soon blocked up our retreat, and we found ourselves most unwilling spectators of the conflict. Political watchwords were loudly shouted by each party, and at last the students, who appeared to be yielding to superior numbers, called out for the intervention of police. The aid was nearer than they expected, for at the same instant a body of mounted policemen, whose high helmets rendered them sufficiently conspicuous, were seen trotting at sharp pace down Dame Street. On they came with drawn sabres, led by a well-looking gentlemanlike personage in plain clothes, who dashed at once into the middle of the fray, issuing his orders, and pointing out to his followers to secure the ringleaders. Up to this moment I had been a most patient and rather amused spectator of what was doing. Now, however, my part was to commence, for at the word "Charge!" given in a harsh, deep voice by the sergeant of the party, Marius, remembering his ancient instinct, picked up his ears, cocked his tail, flung up both his hind legs till they nearly broke the provost windows, and plunged into the thickest of the fray like a devil incarnate. Self-preservation must be a strong instinct, for I well remember how little pain it cost me to see the people tumbling and rolling beneath me, while I continued to keep my seat. It was only a moment before, and the immense mass were a man-to-man encounter. Now all the indignation of both parties seemed turned upon me. Brickbats were loudly implored, and paving stones begged to throw at my devoted head. The wild huntsman of the German romance never created half the terror, nor 1/10 of the mischief that I did in less than 15 minutes, for the ill-starred beast continued twining and twisting like a serpent, plunging and kicking the entire time, and occasionally biting too. All which accomplishments, I afterwards learned, however little in requesting civil life, are highly prized in the horse police. Every new order of the sergeant was followed in his own fashion by Marius, who very soon contrived to concentrate in my unhappy person all the interest of about 1,500 people. "Secure that scoundrel!" said the magistrate, pointing with his fingers towards me, as I rode over a respectable-looking old lady with a grave muff. "Secure him! Cut him down!" "Oh, devil's luck to him if ye do!" said a newsmonger with a broken shin. On I went, however, and now, as the fates would have it, instead of ferrying me out of further danger, the confounded brute dashed onward to where the magistrate was standing, surrounded by policemen. I thought I saw him change colour as I came on. I suppose my own looks were none of the pleasantest, for the worthy man evidently liked them not. Into the midst of them we plunged, upsetting a corporal, horse and all, and appearing as if bent upon reaching the alderman. "Cut him down, for heaven's sake! Will nobody shoot him?" said he, with a voice trembling with fear and anger. At these words a wretch lifted up his sabre and made a cut at my head. I stooped suddenly, and throwing myself from the saddle, seized the poor alderman round the neck, and both came rolling to the ground together. So completely was he possessed with the notion that I meant to assassinate him, that, while I was endeavoring to extricate myself from his grasp, he continued to beg his life in the most heart-rending manner. My story is now soon told. So effectually did they rescue the alderman from his danger that they left me insensible, and I only came to myself some days after by finding myself in the dock in Green Street, charged with an indictment of 19 counts. The only word of truth is what lay in the preamble, for the devil inciting me only would ever have made me the owner of that infernal beast, the cause of all my misfortunes. I was so stupefied from my beating that I knew little of the course of the proceedings. My friends told me afterward that I had a narrow escape from transportation, but for the greatest influence exerted in my behalf, I should certainly have passed the autumn in the agreeable recreation of pounding oyster shells or carding wool, and it certainly must have gone hard with me, for stupefied as I was, I remember the sensation in court when the alderman made his appearance with a patch over his eye. The affecting admonition of the little judge, who when passing sentence upon me adverted to the former respectability of my life and the rank of my relatives, actually made the galleries weep. 4 months in Newgate and a fine to the king then rewarded my taste for horse exercise, and it's no wonder if I prefer going on foot. As to Miss Eversham, the following short note from the dean concluded my hopes in that quarter. Deanery, Wednesday morning. Sir, after the very distressing publicity to which your late conduct has exposed you, the so open avowal of political opinions at variance with those, I will say, of every gentleman, and the recorded sentence of a judge on the verdict of 12 of your countrymen, I should hope that you will not feel my present admonition necessary to inform you that your visits to my house shall cease. The presents you made my daughter when under our unfortunate ignorance of your real character have been addressed to your hotel, and I am your most obedient humble servant, Oliver Eversham. Here ended my second affair, par amour, and I freely confess to you that if I can only obtain a wife in a sea voyage or a steeple chase, I am likely to fulfill one great condition in modern advertising, as having no encumbrance nor any objection to travel. End of section 27. Recorded by Gabby Cowan, April 2014. Wherefore means.blogspot.ca